Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to 93 Theory and Practice. I am your host, Zafa Nur Adonai, also known as Mike. Alright, so today, we have some announcements. So, first announcement is, we snagged a couple guests. So we're not going to have them this episode. Sorry. Schedules, work, life. But we may have them for the very next episode. So if you want to skip over this one, go right ahead. But I don't recommend it because we're still going to get into some cool stuff. So I didn't necessarily have a specific topic for today, so we're just going to kind of free flow here, talk as the spirit wills. So I guess you could say we're going to call upon the spirit influence of Shin to activate the dead elements of our life so that the great tetragrammaton can finally become the pentagrammaton and be inspired to move, have our being. So let's go ahead and just talk about that. Let's talk about the tetragrammaton. So, for those of you who don't know what the tetragrammaton is, it is the four-lettered name of God, well, at least in the Hebrew sense. Tetra being four, gramma being, I think, like word or letter, ton being name, I believe. So you have the four-letter name. If I butchered that, I apologize. Please, like I said, anything that I do mention that you're interested in, please research for yourself, because most of the time when I am speaking about these things, I don't have the actual reference in front of me, mainly just for the sake of just the flow of the episode. I don't want to necessarily be constantly chopping up the videos with little the parts of me like bringing up a page or looking through a paper or something like that. As I get better at this, hopefully I'll be able to memorize my research material a little bit more to where it'll flow off the tongue in a better way. But until then, just be a diligent student if you are truly interested, and kind of delve into these things yourself, correcting any mistakes I may make, and then also expand with your own, conclusions and knowledge. So, we move forward. So, tetragrammaton, the four-lettered name. Just a forewarning, if there are any devout Jews here, in the religious sense, I apologize. I am going to be saying the unsayable name of God. Now, I'm pretty sure, I don't think I have any Hasidic Jews or very Orthodox Hebrews here. If I do, welcome. Awesome. Thank you for being here. But we're going to be blaspheming a little bit here. So just a forewarning, we're going to be saying essentially what it is, the Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. Some people will pronounce it Yahweh, or Jehovah, or Yehovah, however you want to put it. Now, my ongoing man crush with Lon Malu Duquette, he gave an awesome example in one of his books where... oh man, I want to believe it was Chicken Kabbalah. Okay, so probably the only reason people would be coming to this video, if they were, say, Jewish, would be probably because it tags under Kabbalah, because that's something we're going to talk about today. We're definitely going to be talking about it. But in his book, Chicken Kabbalah, I believe he goes over so many different, hilarious examples of pronouncing the name of God, or the unspeakable name of God, true name of God, however you want to put it. But essentially this name being composed of the Hebrew letters Yod, and then the Hebrew letter He, and then the letter Vav, and then another He. Now, you may be asking, okay, cool, Kabbalah is awesome. That is, for those of you who don't know, Kabbalah is basically like a Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah is a different thing to different peoples. If, say for instance, you were a Orthodox Jew of some sort. Kabbalah would be more in line with like mystical Catholicism in the sense that it's the mystical, um, uh, deeper side of the Jewish faith. It involves um, just more of the deeper spiritual, not so much the societal implications of the Bible, um, but the direct spiritual ramifications in connection with obtaining states of consciousness and like acquiring knowledge directly from God and knowledge of the universe, things like that. It's the higher up. Mainly in that sense, it was older men over the age of 40 who were accomplished and yada yada yada. Those are usually the men that would learn Kabbalah. It was only passed on to the firstborn son. In some senses, in most senses, it was an oral tradition, so it wasn't written down. Actually, the first written Kabbalistic text that we have now as modern people, I believe, as far as like being attributed as straight Kabbalah. Okay, so in the sense that we know it today, um, it was the Sefer Yetzirah, which I think was only dated like 15th century, somewhere around there. Please, like I said, guys, correct me if I'm wrong. Um, some of these ideas come to me as I free flow, so I would like to have the most accurate information, but I try and pull it out of my head as best as possible. Um, but it wasn't around there. But of course, Kabbalistic source, so where that is derived from, of course, is the original um, uh, texts, the Book of Jubilees, all the apocryphal kind of Jewish texts, and of course the main books of the Bible. Of course, Kabbalah is specifically based off of the Genesis, Exodus stories. Well, all five books of Moses essentially are the source of Kabbalah. But I'm getting like way off a tangent here. But essentially, Kabbalah is different to other people. To a Jew, uh, it, it would be very different. It would be more of a religious practice. To someone like myself, like a Thelemite. Well, honestly, as a Thelemite, I can adopt any which one I choose, but the one that's most commonly prevalent is Kabbalah as a magical or mystical system in the sense of practical working. So we will use the tree of life, which is a structural diagram of man, the universe, of everything, of God, has different realms, but it is essentially, it's a system of correspondence, of pigeonholing, in a sense, everything in the universe into 10 spheres, of which you then denote attributes of God, and those attributes of God rule over everything that you've pigeonholed into those spheres, and then you have paths between those spheres that kind of act as the runways or receptacles of power between those spheres. It's a whole big complex system that I please everyone should at least investigate a little bit. It's quite awesome. But beyond that, so it's different to different people. So when I speak of Kabbalah in this show, it's going to be purely of that mystical sense, of the sense of the sensory Sefer Yetzirah, the sense that modern mystics would use it. Um, but I do want to distinguish it from like the okay, this is probably going to show my age, but like 15 years ago when like a lot of celebrities were getting into Kabbalah, like Madonna and Britney Spears. Britney Spears got the tetragrammaton tattooed, but like I think the big like joke was she did it wrong because Hebrew isn't read from left to right. It's read from right to left, and I think she got it written left to right, like how we in Western society would do. Um, yeah, I want to distinguish Kabbalah, also our Kabbalah, from that. So, but still, moving forward. Um, its tetragrammaton is Hebrew, and it's based on this. We're going to be viewing it from this our version of Kabbalah viewpoint. But Yod He Vav He, being the four Hebrew letters, is basically the ineffable name of God, the secret name of God you cannot pronounce. In fact, in the original Bible, any time that specific name was meant to be written down or read, it was replaced with a different God name, that being Adonai, meaning Lord, or Master. So it'd be like the equivalent of the modern day person who, instead of saying, let's say for instance, so some people here may be wondering, why can't you say the name of God? Like, if that's your God, um, why can't you say it? Like, that's like saying, like, oh, you can't say your father's real name. Like, could you imagine having a father who's like, do not ever call me by my real name. I will punish you forever. But like, it's kind of weird. But it's so holy. The whole concept is the name is so holy and it's so transcendent that to truly speak the name would be to have like the power of God. Because you have to remember also the ancient belief about words, which is the belief that we should have, is that words have power. Um, Words essentially have power over the physical thing of which the word is describing, or the phenomenon of which the word is describing. In a sense, once you give something a word, a symbol, you then gain control of that thing because you have a symbol for it. Um, you see, it's like magic. So to know the name of, say, like a demon or an entity would be to have some sort of dominion over it. Now, of course, they didn't view this with everything. Of course, angels would come down. If they knew the name of the angel, of course, they wouldn't necessarily be able to control it. But in a sense, yes. In the magical view, in the mystical view of that time, yes, if you knew the name of a jinn or a spirit, you essentially had some way of controlling, or at least the first step of controlling that thing. Um, but aside from that, it's just the name is so holy, you don't say it. Not that you would be able to say it, being a mere mortal. So don't even try. Um, we don't take that view. We are innately blasphemers because, in a sense, in Thelema, we see beyond the veil of this of deceit. We see beyond the veil of holiness and understand that holiness is found within, and to truly know thyself, you must unveil every layer and expose everything to the light. So, um, so the ineffable name of God, Yod He Vav He, in our mystical sense, represents many, many things. Of course, I'll just go down the list, and then we'll expound from there. Yod He Vav He would represent the four seasons, the four elements, the four archetypes of persona, that being father, mother, son, and daughter, would represent the four cardinal directions, essentially. So, any quad concept in the grand sense would be categorized as one of the four segments of Yod He Vav He. So in this sense, you have God as fire, God as water, God as air, and God as earth. What is the significance of that? The significance of that is it gives a good representation if God is the creator of everything. So think of this. There is this being, transcendent being that created all things. He manifested all things, and through our conception of reality, those four things manifested into four conditions. Being a fiery condition, being a watery condition, an airy condition, and an earthly or solid condition. Now, this is pretty self-evident when you just want to talk about like basic primal science, I guess. You would say there's this thing called fire, which is the phenomenon of the universe that can be categorized as hot or energetic or forceful. So like lightning and magma and the hot day of the sun, things like that, would be categorized as the fiery conditions of God, or the fiery conditions of all of existence, which if God created all existence, these are a part of his creation. So we've categorized 25%, essentially, of all phenomenon in the universe as being these phenomenon coming from this one being. Blah, blah, blah. So we go down the line. So everything like oceans and waves and tears and sweat and dew and things like that phenomenon, of course, a lot more, would be categorized as that he, the first he right after the yod, yod he vav he. So hopefully this gives you a general example of the categorization of things in the name yod he vav he. Now, of course, once all these things are compiled, essentially what you get. Now, in the original view of the religious view, originally when you compile all four elements of existence, what you get is God. You get Jehovah. You get Yod He, Vav He. Okay? Now, what you actually get, now this is my estimation, but of course an estimation I've made over long periods of research, but my estimation is that what you get is an image of God. You get the compiled, complete image of the Creator. You get, think of it this way. When you create something, you are mirrored in your creation. Because it's you. You've poured your energies, your inspiration, your focus into a thing. Say, for instance, everyone here was going to sculpt something. They were going to say, sculpt an image of yourself. Now, you're going to, of course, try your best. And I say, of course, try your best. And do this. Sculpt a little effigy of yourself made of clay. Now, despite artistic ability, whatever you would create would be an expression of yourself. Someone who truly knows you and may truly know your abilities may look at that and say, yeah, that is so-and-so. I know they created it just by, say, for instance, looking at it like a Van Gogh. If you see a Van Gogh painting, you could say, oh, that is definitely a Van Gogh. I can see him in every stroke of the brush. But in a sense, that same thing. So what we get is a representation of the true God. But as a whole, most of us in history have associated that representation with being God, with Jehovah being the true Jehovah. So Kabbalah, of course, we have 10 spheres. Now, when I'm speaking of Jehovah, I'm speaking of one particular sphere. Now, if you wanted to fall in line with the religious view of this, which is completely okay, it would have you believe that this Jehovah is the one, the all, the self-containing manifester of all existence, that beyond him there is nothing. He is the top of the chart, okay? You would have you believe that God would be Kether, the crown, number one. Because remember, the tree of life has 10 spheres. One is at the top, 10 being at the bottom, everything in between being the other various numbers descending down. So it would have you believe that the true source of everything, that if there is nothing beyond God, he must be numero uno, so he would be Kether. But in the Kabbalistic view, Jehovah is actually being of the number 4, being the essence of 4, being quadrangular in all his essence, is Chesed, the 4th Sephira. Now remember, you have Keter, which then becomes Chokmah, which is number 2, which then becomes Binah, which is number 3, which then becomes Chesed, which is number 4. I'm sorry, guys, if you don't like the way I say Chesed. I freaking love it. In that sphere, you have the demiurge, the creator. Now, this is the creator, but this is the creator of all manifest reality as we perceive it, as our knowable reality. Now, of course, in a spiritual sense, this is beyond our knowable reality, but in a sense not, because what is very important about Chesed, about this sphere of Jupiter, Io Pitar, what is so special is the fact that he is below this thing called the abyss. If you want to basically explain it, the abyss, in a conceptual sense, you could think of it like the vast nothingness of space. So like say you had a little spaceship, and you're like, I'm going to send that spaceship to the far reaches of space to try and find God. Like, I know God's somewhere out there, and he's that direction. Just so happens to be the east. And I'm going to shoot my spaceship right out there, and we're going to go find him. Here's the problem. The vastness of that distance between you and God is so great you probably will never reach him. It's a great abyss of nothingness. Or, if you want to categorize it, an abyss of everythingness mixed up and jumbled. However you want to view an abyss, essentially it's that. It's an pretty much uncrossable chasm of something. But it separates the supernal sphere of 1, 2, and 3, the first triad. It separates that extremely heavenly realm from the lowerly heavenly realm of what we can actually understand, comprehend, and partake of, I guess, while in physical form or of denser vibration. But essentially, he is below that. So he is essentially God that we can conceptualize. But in the true sense, that conceptualization of God is just essentially us worshiping that created image of God. So it's the piece of the creation worshiping the bigger whole of that creation instead of turning around and trying to seek the person who actually created that creation. Now, of course, you're now going to get into a brain loop of, oh, so we're going to be continually searching for what created the thing that I thought created the thing that I am. But yeah, that's what reincarnation is, man. In fact, in every sphere of the tree of life is a highest conceptualized possible way of viewing God in that sphere. So in a sense, there's 10 on the tree of life. There are 10 highest ways of your monkey brain to understand God. And all 10 of those things correlate into one thing, which is that thing which created everything that you can spiritually conceptualize and physically, mentally conceptualize. And then, here's the cool thing, there's even a realm of existence beyond that. And that's the realm of nothingness, where you have the Ein, Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Or. But that we're not going to get into right now. But essentially, I just want to illustrate to you that there's almost always a bigger boss head behind the boss head. The God that humanity has generally worshipped in a form of a patriarchal deity that essentially dishes out creation and judgment and blessing. That being, for all the grandness that man attributes to him, because it's generally a guy, is essentially the false god. He is the demiurge. He is the creator, but he is the vengeful creator who can't even understand himself, because he is below the abyss. Can't even understand his own true nature. So his own insecurities are then passed on to us, and we are the ones taking the punishment for it. Sounds cool, huh? But of course, if you read the Old Testament on the surface layer, you will see a lot of that. You will see a lot of God kind of almost like roping his people into situations that he can then punish them for. It's kind of sucky, but yeah, it happens. The thing that comes to mind repeatedly is Esau. How God loved, I believe it was, no, God. Is it Jacob? Jacob and Esau? Oh my God, this is bad. I've read the story a lot, guys, I'm sorry. But it has been a while. But Esau, he hated in his mother's womb. Yeah, the creator of everything hated something he created so much that before it even had a chance to like redeem itself in any possible way, he friggin' hated it. That should tell you straight off the bat that this God that created everything that you perceive perhaps isn't very loving, or at least is very conditionally loving. So how did that God become the Lord in the New Testament? We'll find out later. But that God is the demiurge. That is Jehovah, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. In astrological senses, that is Jupiter, Io-Pitar. He is the Grand Father, the Creator, the great Lord of all, the King, the Magistrator, he who rules the kingdom. When in fact, in the Kabbalistic sense on the Tree of Life, he is the God who has subjugated the kingdom of Malkuth. He has taken it over by force and rules it in our religious sense. And I'm speaking in our practical religious sense here on Earth, as far as how religions have evolved. By this I mean, in the Greek religion, you have Zeus being the almighty god. Zeus is essentially like Jupiter. Now, of course, we know there was gods beyond Zeus, Pluto, Uranus, but those are so far beyond, couldn't really get to them. Kind of cool, huh? Then you have, of course, in our Christian religion, Jehovah, whatever. I know that probably doesn't etymologically go together, but you get the sense. A lot of ancient religions, their highest conception of God was the planet Jupiter. But we know that there are planets beyond Jupiter. Saturn, of course, being the bringer of life, but that also being not necessarily conceptualized. We don't understand it. That's a whole nother spiel I really like getting into. Saturn. Saturn's awesome. But this Jehovah, Yod-He-Vav-He, is the demiurge. If you want to view that as negative, you sure can. If you want to view it positively, you sure can. I may come off like I view this negatively, which I guess in a reactionary sense, I do view the doctrine of Jehovah as being negative. But I also can jump over to the opposite pillar on the tree of life and understand that a lot of what we know about Jehovah is not Jehovah's fault. It's our fault. But if you also want to take the view that if Jehovah is a personification and idealization of an archetypal phenomena that transcends all reality as well as is within us, you could then say that if this Jehovah is also in us and everything, not quite everything we know about him, is true, but yet we are the purveyors of him, also we are him, then we are the ones who ultimately created that falsehood. Thus, Jehovah is that falsehood which we have created him to be. And if you want to believe that the Bible is historical and those things actually did happen and the person who did make them happen was this jealous God Jehovah, then you could also adopt a innately negative view towards it. But as mystics, we are called to a higher set of living, or I should say a more middle way of living. So the middle pillar way of viewing this would be it's either way. It is beneficial either way. To view it negatively gives you power in the sense that if this God that we have created is creating this havoc, perhaps we should seek the true source. It gives us a personal sense of liberation that we can become warriors on the path of true knowledge and take up the true mystical cause of Kabbalah and seek the supernal triad. Or we can take the opposite side and see that viewpoint as positive and understand that if this is the current system that we live in, if this Jehovah is the God of which most of humanity worships innately because they are slaves to this Jehovah, then I can utilize that. I can use it. That's good. That gives me a current system. If this is the system of which the universe works, this gives me, I have the opportunity to understand and utilize that for my own gains and essentially do what I believe to be good in the world. Both viewpoints could be practical, but they are, like our political system, they are two extremes of the same pole. If you take the middle pillar approach, you can understand that if you are free of those extremes, you are free to traverse those extremes willingly, as long as you can come back to the middle, essentially being unattached to the result of each extreme, thus transcending it. I probably sound wackadoo right now. I'm sorry, guys. But essentially, once you understand the whole conceptualization of Yod-He-Vav-He, once you understand to separate him into a Yod and a He and a Vav and a He, and then you understand the remending of that creates a singular cause, blah, blah, blah. But either way, Kabbalah is awesome. It teaches you that this grand God, in a sense, you can learn a lot about us through the whole intersection and dissection of tetragrammaton. Further on, the importance of tetragrammaton is in at least magic, or at least our version of magic, or spiritual illuminism, is essentially everything that we do is categorized under that. So of course, you know that the four elements are extremely powerful to the Hermetic viewpoint. The fact that everything, every phenomenon can be pigeonholed, not just into the 10 spheres of the tree of life, but even those spheres can then be pigeonholed into 4 realms or 4 elemental existences. Yeah, so everything can be basically reduced down to 4. Now, of course, you're saying, no, everything can reduce down to 2, man. You got on and off. Yes. But you have to have someone turning it on and someone turning it off, so thus you have 2 conditions, subject and an object. Okay, either way. And then you have the opposite of that, so you're always going to have 4. That's a little bit more complicated. That has to go into the ramifications of dualistic gods down the through the abyss. But everything that we can essentially categorize gets reduced down into one of the 4 states of fire, water, air, and earth, and I say it in that exact sense because of tetragrammaton. Now, of course, most people who like movies will say earth, air, fire, water, earth, air, fire, water, or those who are more into witchcraft, that could be their particular chant to say it in that. Plus, it just sounds cool when you say it like that, but in our mystical sense, it is fire, water, air, earth. And that is the mode of manifestation down the scheme. So everything gets categorized into those 4 things. So in Hermetic thought, that is the key first principle, is that whole dichotomy of 4 elements and everything. Now, what makes that so important is it can be applied to practically anything, even your own psyche, your own way of being. So fire would be your will. Will being your capacity to actually do what you desire or make manifest what you desire. So if you want to think of the concept of willpower, to either force yourself to physically do something or to physically not do something. So to restrain force, to oppress force, or to release force in a desired manner. Or in the concept of explosive force. But anything in the sense of releasing energy is given off as fire. Then you have the inevitable reaction to that use of force. You have the environmental. So like in the sense of you doing something, you have the environmental reaction on a pool of water. And I saw the video just turned off. So we were talking about fire being force. But if you were to push on water, the mirrored effect of your force would be represented as a wave. So your push would be a fiery act. The reaction, which is part of the action that you're doing, it's all one thing, is the wave of the water. I'm sorry, this is getting a little abstract, but essentially in a real sense, it is the reaction to your action. In a personal way, in a psychological way, it is the emotional or the perception that we get. So like that innate feeling we get for doing something. Or in a sense, kind of like our memory of doing it. Think of water as like a pool of water. When it's still, it creates images. When it's shooken or stirred, it also creates images, but of a distorted effect. In the same sense, our action creates these distorted images, but they are the reaction. They are the receptacle of those actions. Like our memory is the receptacle of everything of our actions that we've done. That's how we recall things that have happened to us and things that we have happened to the universe, is through our memory. So that's the receptacle of it. That's the watery part. The airy part would be, in a sense, like if you think air, it's the air that we breathe. It's the thing that you can't see, but it permeates absolutely everything. You cannot live without it. So air is analogous to like thought. you can't breathe, you can't think. I mean, it's that in its most basic sense. But air, being the concept of thought, basically all phenomenon are then subject to that. Thought. If you think fire requires like a fuel source, it requires oxygen to burn. The oxygen being air, that's thought. You have to have a fixed mode of thinking, or at least a thought, to produce a willed form of action. So produce will, you have to have a thought. So you have to have the fuel, of course, is us, the air, or the earth. It's the it's the final che. So yeah, that's essentially when you want to think about the scheme of things. That's how the four elements play into tetragrammaton. It's the father fire is balanced out by his opposite mother water, who when they interact create a third state. You want to think of it steam, hot, moist, hot moisture, father fire being hot, mother water being cold and wet, father dry. Produces a mixture of those two things, a third condition that rectifies, and that being steam, which is moist, hot air. Steam condenses, and you get earth, in a sense. But that's kind of like how it flows down the tree. But you can kind of see, in a sense, where we have that first break. Yeah. So the four elements, separated in this fashion, create what we are and what we perceive. So if it's what we are, if we can literally correlate, if we are made up of the four elements that everything else is made up, so those same four elements make up my entire environment, they make up the heavens, the celestial heavens, they make up the spiritual heavens, they make up God himself. If all four things are encapsulated by these four elements, the four elements are the transcendent states of reality as well. That is exemplified in the Tree of Life as the four realms, being Atziluth, fire, Bria, water, Yetzirah, air, and Asaya, earth, or earthy material. Everything is in that. So if you can understand the conception of the four elements, if you can delve in and understand what the four elements are, then you will then gain access into what the four elements are for yourself. Vice versa. So that's the whole concept of tetragrammaton, is a way of understanding God, the universe, and his creation, and how you yourself are inevitably linked to that whole process. Now, this, if you want to say, oh, this is a really cool way of viewing things, but how does it really practically apply to everyday life? Well, first of all, our ancients, our ancestors, I should say, did. They applied this to everyday life in the sense that they categorized four seasons. You have spring, the bursting forth of life. Then you have, then you have summer, which is life at full force being just hot and burning forth. Then you have an opposite reaction to that heat. You have autumn, and autumn is wet, watery. It's also cooler. And then you have the final stage of winter, which is symbolized by earth. It is the coldest, densest state. So there's the four seasons. So the entire year is separated into four, it's been quadrified. So in that sense, that breaks it down, also down into who you are as a person. You are someone who thinks, someone who has their being, earth, air, earth, someone who requires moisture, I guess, so water. You're a being who feels, who has emotions, so water. And then you're also a being who has a will and an individuality, so you have a fiery nature. So all of that is encompassed in Yod He Vav He. So it explains essentially everything that you can perceive under the abyss. Now, of course, the elements exist above the abyss. Well, the three first elements, fire, water, and air exist above the abyss, as Kether being air. That if you were thinking fire should be first, kinda, but in a sense, it's air first, in a very particular sense, and then fire. But yeah, air is Kether, Chokmah is fire, and Binah is water. Those three elements are the native elements, the primal elements. They are symbolized by the Hebrew letters Aleph, Aleph being Keter, Yod being, oh God, not Yod, sorry, Shin, Shin being Chokmah, and then Binah would be Mem, for Mem being the letter for water. So those three are called the mother letters, but they are the first manifestations of God as truth, as a trinity, triune. So essentially God above our understanding. So the best way that we can understand God above the abyss is in this sense, as a trinity. So we still can't even understand the unity. We still have to think of God like we've passed the four. So essentially we've left Earth behind. We left our physical perception of things behind. And we've transcended into the more spiritual, subtle realms where only fire, water, and air, essentially where all your perceptions are just what you can think, spiritually conceive, and will. God, in that sense, can only be viewed as a trinity. So God, the single, can only still be viewed as a triangle. But that, in a sense, is a higher conception of God. God, the Trinity, is still higher than God, the Father, Jehovah. So that triune being, being above the abyss, is the three mother letters, is the three native elements. Earth, in that sense, being a false element, or being an unmanifest element, not being real. But as we learn, as being Hermetists, as above, so below, Kether's in Malkuth, as Malkuth is in Kether. So even in the airy nature of Keter, you have the earthly nature of Malkuth. This is also correlated within that whole doctrine of once fire and water mix, you have air as the third state, and then that condenses down into earth. But you think if you have fire, which is just pure energy, and you have water, which is pure liquidity, and you mix those two things and you get air, which should just be excited, watery things, when that condenses, shouldn't just condense down back into water. Why is there physical substance left? Because magically there is a fourth condition that is created in that admixture. So in the phenomenon of water and fire mixing, creating a third state, a fourth state is manifested by those three conditions. And that fourth state is earth. It is material existence. It is what we are. So in a sense, it is false that, yes, conceptually you cannot understand how a fourth state can manifest. So it's something being created from nothing. But isn't that true of our very existence here on earth? We cannot actually understand where we came from. The best we can actually perceive is a Big Bang, but what preceded that Big Bang? What material existence preceded that Big Bang? Was it material at all, or was it just an energetic explosion that then produced everything we know as physical phenomenon? In the same sense, this triune admixture of elements above the abyss creates a fourth condition of material existence, something that shouldn't exist, but it does. That's what we are. We shouldn't exist, but we do. But it's cool because we are what's above the abyss as well. This is like a great experience that we get to do. It's like, in a sense, a mistake, but it's a cool mistake. It's a mistake that you shouldn't cry over. It's a mistake you should laugh over. You should be fools about it. It's phenomena, ex-nomena. But sorry, I just got really excited. Yeah. But yeah, that three conception is the truer God, and that's what we try and find and delve into. So yeah, let's move on to our tarot reading. So I was on Google Images. And I was looking at tarot cards for the Thoth Tarot. I can't necessarily remember what I was looking for because I have a deck. I just can't remember that. But I came across like some tarot decks that were based on the Thoth Tarot that were like more modern interpretations. And they were kind of cool, man. They were really cool. I kind of dug the art. One of them was just like an updated, like they kind of just updated the art, which I didn't appreciate as much because like I actually really like the art that's on these cards, like the original art. But the newer ones were like a little bit, the colors were modified and the textures were modified, so it had kind of a cooler look. Another one was almost like a complete redrawing of the cards, but still keeping the core, a lot of the, I would assume all the core. I didn't look through all the cards, but essentially all the core correspondence. I dug it, man. It was cool. I could only find like a digital version. Oh, it was the App Store. Sorry, not Google Images, the App Store. There was like an app for like these, but it was like different cards in development or something. It was kind of cool, man. It was kind of cool. I dug it. It just kind of shows that the tarot, being a pictorial representation of the universe, is just that. It's a pictorial representation, man. It's your representation. It's the whole thing. You put your meaning onto these cards. Now, they have some set meanings, depending on what tradition you want to belong to. But ultimately, it's what you do with it, man. So, our card is Ace of Wands. Cool. This is freaking awesome. So, this is the Ace of Wands. Ace of Wands represents fire. So in Yod He Vav He, tetragrammaton, Ace of Wands is the Yod. It's the first manifestation of God as fire. The Ace of Wands is in the image of the tree of life, made up of 10 Yods. So it's Atziluth, being everything in Atziluth, being of the condition of fire. So every element in Atziluth is still a condition of fire. So like, in a sense, Kether in Atziluth would be air of fire, but it would still be of air playing on fire. So everything is condition of fire. So Yod, everything's essentially originated from the Yod. Yeah, so what does that card mean to us? Well, we just talked a lot about tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, how the Yod, the spark, manifests all things. So I'd like to interpret it as we're sparking something, man. I feel like there's beyond, if anyone ever watches these videos, I kind of feel like, in a sense, this episode might just spark something in someone, might ignite that initial yud within them and explode just a universe of experience. But if you also want to view it, this is a start of something for me. The podcast is the first step, in a sense. Very important step. It is the yod in my journey. It's the very tip of my yod. In fact, in this whole conception, the very, very, in Yod He Vav He, the very, very tip of the Yod. Because you gotta remember, Yod is actually Chokmah, being fire. But the very tip of that Yod is in Keter, in air. Everything that we will initially starts in its most minute sense as a thought. Okay? As the element of air, as the Aleph. Remember, the first thing that was actually created above the abyss was air and Kether, the Aleph. Then it was fire and Chokmah. That's reflected down in our quadrangular perception of reality and of our quadrangular perception of being able to do things in our formula of tetragrammaton. Everything still starts in its smallest sense as air, so that Yod is first air. This has always been, in its most minute sense, in my head. But now we are taking our first step. We are willing it into manifestation. We are forcing ourselves to do these things to try and manifest our will. So this is it. This is what we're doing. The Ace of Wands marks our beginning, marks the first airy conception of what should be into physical reality as fire. We are willing it. We are doing the work. We are putting the force in. We're putting the time and the sacrifice. I don't know why I keep saying we, me, and our guests. Our guests are sacrificing their time to come here. But we are going to ignite something in them. We're going to set a fire, and we're going to watch the world burn, baby, in a cool sense. It's the apocalypse. Have some fun, guys. On that note, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.